Welcome to Charts Today. It is Tuesday, the 30th of June, the last day of the quarter, which is important for a lot of funds. And we start by looking at this chart of the Japanese yen, hitting 40-year lows against the dollar, remembering that this is the dollar buying yen. So we're seeing the dollar now buys more yen, i.e. yen weakness. And so if we look at the long-term chart, we've got a very big upside target, and on the short-term chart, we've got a target to 166. So, amazing to think that it's gone from around 100 yen to the dollar to 163 yen in the space of a few years, and just in the last year alone, nearly a 20% devaluation in the currency. So this is still a worry for global markets, just that situation in Japan. Weaker yen, of course, is going to be inflationary. If we look at the bond yields, we see that it's actually, we have got some respite here on the daily bond yield chart. 2.8% was where we hit. Japan being the most indebted nation in the world, this is still a concern. But we start by looking at that. That is also just fueling that stronger dollar. We've got this long sideways move over the last year, and we are just seeing a break here to 12-month highs. So that is significant for the dollar. And if we look at the 60-minute chart, we have gone back below. And of course, the picture is still very mixed, because if we look at the weekly chart, we are still below the cloud with a downside target. So really, it's too hard to call which way we're going to go longer term, but short term, we are seeing dollar strength. That is leading to euro weakness on the medium term chart with a downside target activated to 104. We are below the cloud, so that's quite key as well. Sterling, we are a smidgen away from breaking to give a new downside target. And if you look at the 60-minute chart for sterling, we do have downside targets back into the mid 120s, 126. So certainly a break below 131.50 would be confirming for that. Looking at Bitcoin, the short term is still pretty bearish. The medium term chart just sinking to new lows. That 58,000 level is the next level to watch. The Nasdaq, we are still bullish on the medium term chart, of course, but if we look at the 60-minute chart, we haven't made a high since the start of the month. So we are just seeing that run that we saw in May, just as we're coming to the end of the month, and of course 4th of July weekend upcoming as well. We are just seeing some consolidation there. Looking at the S&P future, also struggling to make new highs. Its high was more recent. And if we look at the future, again, we're up slightly, which just does suggest that we're going to open higher today. Looking at the the FTSE future, flat to middling. And if we look at the DAX, also fairly flat here as well. And the Japanese market stronger on that weaker yen. So earnings for Japanese companies going higher. We saw a big move in the Hang Seng yesterday, unwinding today, and that medium-term chart is still pretty bearish with that downside target. And the Shanghai Composite also mixed, and Sensex looking relatively weak. And the Aussie market, end of the tax year in Oz, still waiting to see which way we break there, but fairly flat. If we look at the short-term chart, do have a downside target, and we are moving below the cloud. Brent crude continues to be weak. We've called it bearish today for our clients who trade energy, and we can see on the long-term chart those downside targets being met. So that is still quite bearish, and WTI, a similar picture there below the cloud. Cocoa down 2% this morning. This is the medium-term chart, but a recovery is in train there for cocoa, and we do have upside targets, so looking more bullish. Coffee, you may recall, we covered when it broke that 280 level was really quite key. Has bounced back, but finding resistance on the cloud. And sugar has really bounced off this 1320 level, one that I watch for a client quite closely. But we are still below the cloud. If we break that 13 level, that's going to be really quite key. Short term, there's the move above the cloud. And we can see on that unactivated downside target both on the weekly and the daily, so that's going to be quite key. Gold has actually been very, very weak. On the weekly chart, we are on our way still to that target. On the daily chart, that downside target given at 4,500 met at 3,900. We are back above 4,000, quite an important number for gold, and we do seem to be finding a floor around that 3,950 level. 4,100 would be the next level to break, and silver has also been weak with downside targets there. And we look at the daily chart, quite compelling downside targets. US 10-year yields, we're seeing a little bit of respite there, just pulling back. And if we look at the tech majors, Apple still looking relatively weak on that daily chart with a downside target. Amazon showing its strength, and Alphabet, which was my call for the year in the Mag 7, is still looking pretty good. Microsoft has been a very weak performer, testing those new lows again. Nvidia, really quite key. And if we look at SpaceX, they were up strongly yesterday, up 7%. These are the daily candles. They do convey quite a lot just looking at the daily candles. Do watch my session on candlesticks on the website, find the LSEC session. But now we go on the 60-minute. We have got a little bit more information. And of course, if you're using TradingView, you can watch here with all the price targets as well. Going to the 5-minute, you can see these targets kicking in yesterday. That one was met and exceeded. And then if we look at the Dow 30, Caterpillar has recovered. It was seeing quite a big fallback on the chart the day before yesterday, but it has actually bounced back, so that's looking quite strong. It was down quite sharply on Friday, but recovering. Still a great looking chart. Cisco Systems also quite strong. Amazon, the weak performers, we saw Verizon down 5%. And below the cloud there as well. Looking at the Nasdaq, we saw strategy very heavily aligned to Bitcoin. Big move yesterday, but still a terrible looking chart. Western Digital, on the other hand, still a great looking chart. You can see there we are strongly above the cloud with upside targets. Applied Materials up 10%. Really big moves in some of these Nasdaq stocks. Look at that, making new highs. And then on the downside, it's the case of the weak get weaker, and we're seeing here downside targets and below the cloud, so you really can't ignore the trend there. Last of all, a quick look at the UK market, and if we rank by percentage performance, you can see Anglo-American topping the list there, still not making new highs and a downside target, but holding above the cloud. Antofagasta also still holding above the cloud. Polar Capital, very strong performer there. Sainsbury's, interestingly, are in the mix, but not looking great. And Glencore, you notice these resource stocks looking quite strong. Scottish Mortgage there as well on the medium-term chart. Intercontinental Hotels. So it's just a case of going through the list. Look at that. That is actually a strong looking chart with the upside target being met. On the downside, Persimmon down 5% and downside targets below the cloud. Really do need to avoid being in these kind of stocks. So that's quite a key thing to watch. That's it for today. Keep an eye on those price targets and the trends. Until tomorrow, have a great day. Bye for now.